Welcome to the Wealth Matters podcast, where investors come together to better understand how to build passive cash flow and create generational wealth without all the confusing mumbo-jumbo. Here's your host and co-author of Amazon #1 bestseller, Alpesh Pamar.
Welcome to Wealth Matters podcast. We are going to talk to another Airbnb short-term rental operator, coach, and author. Her name is Kim Cressell. She has been involved in real estate rentals and property manager for more than 20 years. So she has a lot of wisdom, and we'll try to unravel, we'll try to learn as much as possible in the next 25 to 30 minutes. But her work began with annual lease rentals in key cities, and then she learned how to double and sometimes even triple the rental income by switching to nightly, weekend, and weekly rentals using available technology platforms like Airbnb, VRBO, Booking.com, and many others. So, of course, this is more about short-term rental, and I have been trying to learn as much as possible in this industry for the last 3 years. I would have actually acquired a short-term rental right when COVID hit, and somehow I didn't go through with it. So I want to learn as much as possible today, and also for my listeners on how they can just have one or two properties and make as much dollars as possible, or what they could have made from maybe 10 long-term rentals. So welcome, Kim.
Thank you so much, Alpesh. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Absolutely. So the first question we ask everyone, tell us something interesting or funny about yourself.
Okay. All right. Okay. My partner and I, we were traveling, I think for a trade show up to Chicago, and then we were coming out of a bar. It was a little bit late at night. This is a few years ago, and I could still stay up a little later, but we were coming out of a bar. For some reason, we were in a great hurry. And as we headed out of the bar, where we'd been for a little while, we accidentally bumped into, or shall I say, knocked over a woman. And I realized that we had kind of bowled her over. And then I'm picking her up by the elbows and kind of lifting her up. And I'm coming face to face with this woman. And to my shock and dismay, I'm face to face with Dame Helen Mirren, the famous actor.
Whoa!
And I'm face
Helen
to face
Mirren.
with her. I'm like,
what was that movie? The
like,
Eagle Eyes
Miss
or
Mirren.
something?
I know.
Wow.
It's like, I am so sorry. We came eye to eye, and this goes without saying, but she wasn't very happy with me.
Right.
So if she ever hears your podcast, which I'm sure she will, she should know I'm very, very, very sorry.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah, she's a good actress. I
She's
like her work.
excellent. Yeah, she's really excellent.
Oh, that's funny.
So yeah.
Wow,
Close
that's
encounter.
funny.
Yeah.
So how did you get started with real estate?
Well, it wasn't intentional at all. My partner at the time and I worked in corporate America for many years, and as such, we, being executives of companies, we would get moved around quite a bit. Luckily, we were moved to the same city, so that was quite, fruitful in most cases. So we typically buy a property or a home wherever we were. It might be Atlanta, it might be Tampa. And then when we got relocated again, instead of selling that home, we were sort of sentimental types who would just kind of, and we love real estate, so we would just kind of hang on to it, And so that happened in Atlanta. We ended up renting to, I talk about this a little bit in my book, but we ended up renting to a producer by the name of Tom Luce. And he actually ended up, this guy I'm going to tell you about, but he was like, I'm working on this little show. I'm not sure it's going to be a huge success. And I was like, oh, really? What's the name of your show? And he was like, it's The Walking Dead. And I was like, oh,
okay,
no, well,
Atlanta makes sense. Yeah, because Atlanta is like the next Hollywood.
Exactly. So he was our tenant for maybe a year, maybe a year and a half. And what happened from there is we're like, okay, let's not sell this home. We'd been relocated back to, I think it was Tampa or someplace in Florida on the Gulf, and so we kept that home, and then we put it into the system. At that time, it was more about a VRBO. They were vacation rental by owner. Now they like us to pronounce it VRBO as host. But and then we started putting that home and then a couple of others that we had acquired into VRBO, did very well. And then over the years, as the short-term rental industry evolved, we put them on, of course, Airbnb, and that was a game changer. And then, and then we kind of went from there. And then in the last few years, I've even expanded to using booking.com because they now allow individual homeowners to place their homes on Airbnb and VRBO, much like Airbnb and VRBO. I think they're trying to be a competitor to them. It's a little trickier to use the platform because it was designed primarily for multi-units,
Right.
like hotels. But that's been a real game changer. That really changed our business about 2018, 2019 was introducing booking.com as well. But we'll talk about this probably more a little later, but I love all three platforms and for different reasons. But I'm very much of the opinion, don't be on one. There's a lot of benefit to being on more than one. And so I talk about that quite a bit.
Interesting, because I heard one of my other podcast guests
I know.
saying that, you
I
got
know.
you got to focus on one platform. And I kind of agreed with him, but we'll talk about this. We'll discuss
Right.
this.
Yes, yes.
What kind of assets do you own right now and why in this market? Do you only own short-term rentals or do you have long-term rentals, stocks? What all are you invested in?
Right. So at one point we had up to I think 10 short-term rentals, all operating on Airbnb and VRBO. Now I've skinnied it down to just 2, and that was by design. That happened a couple of years ago, and I was like, I really, it was kind of the COVID era, and I was like, I really want to focus on writing this book, the How to Rent Your Home or Space on Airbnb and VRBO book. And then I was like, I want to take this knowledge, these learnings over about 20 years on, these platforms and package them and help people, not only those who are just getting started, but those who have been doing it a little while. I mean, I think the key thing for me is talking about elevating hosting, like doing it professionally, doing it as a hospitality business, and doing it in a way that, that neighbors and neighborhoods won't despise us. Because that's a really hot topic right now. There's a lot of flack about short-term rentals, and it's unfortunate. But if we do it right as hosts, then there's nothing to be worried about in our, if we follow the practices that I've sort of, honed over 20 years, there's no need for neighbors to be upset and neighborhoods to be upset. And there's, this can work for everyone.
Got it. So yeah. What is your personal story with hosting?
Okay, my personal story with hosting. I mean, I have done everything from cleaning the toilets to prepping the rooms to a 4-hour, I call it a 4-hour flip from room to, from guest to guest, guests leaving, guests coming in 4 hours later. Yeah. You got multi-units to do. So I've done it. And, it's been a family affair too. I have 2 teenagers. They've had somewhat limited involvement because I wouldn't let them do everything, but there are certain things I asked them to do and help with. And then even today, it's still a family affair because my fiancé is great at decor and staging and that sort of thing. So that it's really, it's a collective effort. It does help if you have more than one person. And it's always been it's been a family endeavor for us.
So I love that you have teenagers and who are involved as well. I love involving my kids, even in my business, even though they are young, because they learn, they understand what you are doing. And third, the best thing is you can write off that expense.
Right, exactly.
Because I'm paying them salary and I'm I'm writing off in my business.
Right. And you can absolutely do that. And, they've been so helpful to me in doing certain things and they've been learning along the way. Yes. So, some family members cannot work together, but we've always been able to work together pretty well. So that's great.
Yeah. And I know you just mentioned your book. I'm looking forward to read that book as well. How to rent your home or space on Airbnb and VRBO. I know I'm going to get an autographed copy. So
I'm sending it to you.
I can't wait to read.
Thank you.
So you, and the reason we wanted to have this episode is that I already had guests who spoke about Airbnb, VRBO, short-term rental. I know the potential myself, but you have something you call it as great recipe. And the recipe is to earn up to 6 figures or more with just 1 or 2 properties. So
yes,
can you tell us what is the great stay recipe?
Right. Well, it's a lot of different things. It's like I say, the Great Stay Recipe is a recipe. It's a lot of ingredients going in to giving the guests an excellent experience. But it takes into account everything from your decor and staging. Less is more to what I call hygge, or I say hygge. It's a word originating from Norway or Denmark, but it's really pronounced huga, but it's about comfort, cozy comfort.
Okay.
Even when it's not winter, but like, how does the bath mat feel under your feet? How do the
Mm.
beds feel? I talk about the heavenly bed that Weston had for many years.
Oh,
They had,
yes.
they have a certain mattress. They have
They
certain
were
sheets.
heavenly,
People
right?
talk about this after they go somewhere,
Yeah.
and then they want to emulate it at home. So that's when I talk about elevating hosting. It's every detail like that, including what does your coffee and tea station look like, to have you stayed in your space, like have you spent a night or two, do you know, like, do you need blackout curtains, or do the blinds let the light in the wrong way in the middle of the night, disrupting sleep?
So, so
It's so
um,
it's
sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt, but it's a
No.
great point. Have
Yeah.
you stayed in your own property? This is so important, right? Because
Yes.
that
Right.
then only you realize, okay, what's missing, what you really need, right? And again, very
Right.
important point for me personally, I need a
Right.
blackout contain. I can't sleep.
Yes.
I need
Oh,
total
it's the
blackout.
best.
So
They're the
so
best.
otherwise,
Yeah.
yeah. So, but sorry, go ahead. I just wanted to
No,
chime
no.
in.
No, I'm glad you did, and I sleep with blackouts at home too. I can't sleep without them anymore. And the guests love it. They're like, "Oh my
Mm,
gosh, I got the best night's sleep I've gotten in forever." If you
mm.
have small children, the children are going to sleep better if it's darker. They're hopefully not going to be bouncing out of bed at 6 a.m. I know some of them do, but it gives everybody in the family a little bit more of a chance to sleep in than they might have had otherwise. But so anyway, it's a lot of granular detail going into that great stay recipe. But again, staying in the space and really enjoying it and experiencing it like a guest would is so important. But yeah, there's a lot to it. But you know what? When you get it right, it's like magic, and that's how you earn those 5-star reviews. And Superhost status on Airbnb and Premier Partner on VRBO.
And that's what I look for when I'm booking. I want to make sure it's a super host. We just stayed in Hawaii at an Airbnb. I
Right.
loved most of it, but the beds were horrible, right? And then
Oh,
yeah,
no, no.
so
Yes.
everything else was good, but I'm like, oh,
Yes.
what is this? They were so
I know. Imagine if they changed the bed,
yeah,
and
that would
and
be
you may,
five
as
star.
yeah, as a host, you might not be able to do it all right away. You might have to start with what you have. But as you keep making money, reinvest it into your home or space and make sure you're always making it a little bit better. And those reviews are going to be your mirror. I mean, they're telling you all the things you're doing right. They're telling you what you need to tweak or change. And another tip I always tell people, if you liked your stay, please post, please post that publicly. If there are things we could improve, please send me a private message and I tell them how to contact me, and that way it sort of keeps your reviews a little cleaner than they might be otherwise, and you
Right.
kind of direct them, put the positive stuff here, and then if there's something feedback we need to improve, send it here, and let them know feedback is very important and you use it to help drive your business forward.
And do they,
Mm.
that's a great point, but do they actually do that? Or because I know most of the people, and as a human being, a lot of time
Hmm.
we want to post the negative stuff before
Hmm.
positive, right? If it's Yelp or
Absolutely.
anywhere else, it's a human nature that, as soon as something doesn't work out, you want to post. But if it's great, you're like, yeah, it's okay. I don't need to post. So recently, when
Right.
I stayed,
Absolutely.
it's a funny story, and it's about Airbnb. That's why I'm mentioning it, because I didn't like the bed, but I reached out to the host and I mentioned
Hmm.
it that this is, and I told them also you are missing this dishwashing liquid, whatnot. The
Hmm.
next day, I had a big bag of goodie bags, but everything else which was missing. So I
Uh-huh.
ended up leaving a 5-star review because I know they couldn't take care of bed right away, but they took care of a lot of other stuff and left us a lot of stuff to enjoy. So,
Right, right. They wanna see Guests wanna see some effort,
right.
if they notice something, I mean, try to be thoughtful in advance, but, if they see thoughtful response afterward, that's golden. You're showing that you care, because there are some hosts out there who are only in it for the money, and they don't care about the guest experience. And if you're in this business, if you want to do well, you really have to care about it and make the effort, the extra effort. It's not always fun. Running out to get dishwasher pods at 11:30 at night is not always fun, and
Right.
sometimes you have a house manager who could do that for you if you're not physically in the
Yeah.
location where you have the rental. But those attending to the guest needs is number one, and do it right away. That would be my advice.
No, I agree.
But yeah, yeah.
So how can
But
listeners, sorry, go ahead. I'll
no,
let
no,
you
it's
finish.
okay. I just want to say one more thing on the reviews. Actually, my guests do follow that
Oh,
suggested
nice.
nice request, like put the good stuff here, send the not the negative feedback, but the suggestions for improvement here. They actually do it in most cases. I mean, there are some people who don't. You're always going to get a bad review here or there,
Right.
but by and large, if you can, just try your best and try to get your systems and people in place in terms of housekeeping and the handy person, then you're going to be in a better position to get those 5-star reviews. Set yourself up for success is what I'm trying to say.
That's great.
Yeah.
How can my
Yeah.
listeners use this approach to maximize bookings and earn more rental income?
Right. Well, I think there's a couple of key points to that. One is, when I talk about the doubling and tripling, and the multi-platform approach has a lot to do with that, because then you are no longer beholden. I'm sort of jumping tracks here a little, but it is important to this question. Um, you're not beholden to say, okay, here's an example. I heard from a client that they were very upset with Airbnb because they've done recent platform changes, and all of a sudden they went from having a lot of bookings to having just a few bookings, but they were only on Airbnb. So that's when it's a benefit to be on a different platform like VRBO, because I've found when one is really up, then sometimes the other dips, but then it kind of switches and it all balances each other out. You don't have all your eggs in one basket, so to speak, and then you're less susceptible when they make algorithm changes or they change up their system. Then you're kind of spread across a few different, your property, your listing is spread across a few different platforms. But how does so that being multi-platform, that will get you more bookings, but you got to remember to synchronize between the systems and make sure that you're avoiding double bookings. The other thing is, of course, in making sure you're making more money. I mean, you can kind of push your rental, your nightlies up a little bit. I use the VRBO Market Maker feature quite a bit, to set pricing and see where others are, and then I usually spread that across the other platforms, because it is a pretty good tool in terms of seeing what your competition's doing. But
Right.
sometimes you might be leaving money on the table with your nightly rental fees, and so there are things that you can do there to sort of tweak and increase your. But the key is making sure you maximize your bookings, and then making sure you're charging the right pricing for those bookings, being across the multi-platforms, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of, I guess, the trifecta approach that helps really boost income. But also, back to what I was saying earlier, when I added booking.com too, it really gave a shot in the arm to our business. And I think we doubled our business once we put our the short-term rentals on booking.com. It was like, wow, just watching it go. It was pretty awesome to see and experience.
So I know you covered my next question a bit, but let me rephrase it, that what are the pros and cons of being on multiple platforms?
Pros and cons. Well, they each have their strengths, and I like them all for different reasons. Airbnb kind of caters to the younger, more tech
Right,
savvy traveler.
millennials, yeah.
VRBO is going to be, generally speaking, there's always exceptions, but they're going to be slightly I can't talk, sorry, skew slightly older in terms of age. You'll see more families, you'll see more multi-generational families, which they're traveling together in groups more and more. We're seeing that a lot. But you're going to see, generally speaking, sometimes too, folks with deeper pockets on VRBO. And so,
Mm,
and then also, I mean, I've had really good experiences with VRBO over the years, but I will say they do take a bigger chunk of the rental pie. They take a bigger percentage of your of the nightly, or whatever rate, your overall rate, what you're paid out. And VRBO's a little slower to pay than Airbnb.
mm,
But I like them for different reasons. And then I would say booking.com helps me fill in the times when I don't have somebody on air or somebody on VRBO. Then booking.com is helping me fill that time. And that booking.com is more of a wide, broad cross section of travelers. But they're doing more and more advertising, which is nice for us as hosts. And people are becoming more and more aware that they can book on booking.com, even in remote rural areas. I had a booking the other day come from booking.com in a cabin in the middle of nowhere, so it's great that way.
That's great. So my point about being on one platform, again, I just want to explore this, is that focusing on one platform allows you to boost, I think so, be Superhost much faster, right? Because you are focused and that algorithm understands that your property is available on that platform 365 days, right?
Right.
So
yes.
Maybe if you are trying to get to the Superhost level faster on Airbnb, is it worth to just focus on it for a bit? And then once you are there, then focus on VRBO and get that, whatever it's called, premier host or
Premier
something.
partner, yeah.
Premium partner.
Yeah.
Is it worth doing it that way, or just focus on earning as much income as possible and spread out yourself on multiple platforms?
I listened to the podcast the other day with the gentleman who was saying he was pretty much Airbnb centric. That's fine. He seemed to think that approach really worked for him, but I can tell you what's worked for me, and that's having the three working together, but making sure I'm watching them to avoid the any double bookings that might arise. They're the platforms, I've got them all synced together. I think I'm just talking on my own experience that having all three, the key is making sure there's someone staying there every night, or as many nights as you can get. And I think that's a very successful strategy. When you talk about earning the Superhost status, and Premier Partner, that's really a mix of factors. How quickly you get back to your guest. Airbnb has gotten very strict on cancellations. If you cancel a certain percentage of your bookings for whatever reason, you can easily lose that Superhost status. They're kind of cracking down. So in answer to your question, it's really about the guest communications on those platforms, and it's really about not canceling if you can avoid it. Of course, if a water main breaks, that's an issue. You can't avoid it. You won't be penalized for that, of course, but you may have to talk to like Airbnb's customer service or VRBO's customer service or booking.com even. But those standards, those designations are hard to earn, and they're hard to keep. They really are.
Right.
I think with everything that I've included in the book, and then I have online courses coming out this fall, we go pretty deep into these things, like how do you get the status, and how do you stay there, more importantly, especially when they're making the standards even more stringent for hosts to meet than ever before.
And I was actually going there as well, because it's earning is one thing. It's like earning those million miles, but you got to stay above and beyond to keep that status.
Right, exactly. And you know what, Bo, to an important point, like I think you touched on it earlier, if I'm traveling, I try to stay in an Airbnb or VRBO property. Because I prefer that to a hotel, actually, and I know many people do. But I do look for the Superhost, and I do look for the Premier Partners.
Me too,
if they don't have it, that's where I search first. So there's a lot of benefit and value to going the extra mile to earn that status and that standard.
So one more thing about comparing the platform, I think it's just being on three platforms. It's just management is the key, right? The calendar, everything else, responsiveness, all that. But on the flip side, one of the pro I can think of is that you are not relying on that one platform. As you said, one day Airbnb or VRBO changes algorithm, one day they do something else, or they don't want you to be a super host anymore for whatever reason. Then if you are in the other platform, you still would be able to continue to earn income, right? So I think that's you are not putting your eggs in one basket.
Right. It's like diversification of your stock portfolio, just making sure. I think the same principle applies here, at least for me, and it's worked well. But it is a little more time consuming to manage, but there are tools that you can use to help tie the three together. You probably know those better than I do, because I know you're really into technology and applications. I sort of tend to do things a little more like low to no tech, and that's how I sort of coach my clients, is like low to no tech, lower those barriers to entry, lower the cost
Right.
barriers to entry,
When
the
you get
technology
started.
barriers, get you in, and then later, if you want to add a tech, a software program or application to help you, all the better. So,
So the big question now,
mhm.
out of three platforms, which platform add the greatest value?
I think, well, I'll answer the question just if it's okay if I take a little liberty with this. Which I'll tell you, I love them all for different reasons. Airbnb is a little more enjoyable as a host because of the user friendliness, because of the way that things are set up. But there are certain things that are easier to do on Air than they are on VRBO. And then there are certain things, and then booking.com is a little more difficult because it really is designed for hotels.
Mm.
I would expect, to get out my crystal ball one of these days, booking.com might buy a VRBO, or, there may be some additional consolidation that we're seeing right now. I think booking.com is really beating a path to try to take Airbnb's market, VRBO's market. So I'm not sure if I answered your question. I enjoy Airbnb. I do not love the VRBO platform. They have updated it quite a bit in the last few years, but it's still hard to do certain things. It's a little more time consuming. The communications platform isn't as good. I could go on for about a couple of hours on this subject alone, but still, I love them for different reasons. They're both, they've helped me take these sitting real estate assets and turn them into money making machines, in essence, that I wouldn't have had otherwise.
Oh,
And then that affords you the lifestyle we were talking about earlier, even before we started the podcast, about being able to travel where you want to travel, to exotic destinations like Hawaii and the Mediterranean, Santorini. That's what you're able to do with short-term rentals. That's why I'm so excited and passionate about it.
that's awesome. So, what pitfalls have you learned over the last 20 years that you can help my listeners to avoid?
I have a couple of good ones that I can share that will hopefully help them avoid missteps and issues. One is, I haven't found any value really to having one night rentals at all, because by the time you pay, unless you're cleaning yourself, um, I wouldn't do a one night rental, because by the time you pay your cleaner, your housekeeper, whatnot, you really haven't made that much money after you've paid the platform. What they charge you and the guest a little bit for that booking. So I don't do nightly rentals anymore. The other thing I would say is, decide on your pet policy early, because that's a big question. If you're going to be pet friendly, or if you're going to be no pet, because that there's pros and cons to both. I've done it both ways. But some guests who are traveling are very allergenic. I have a gentleman coming in a few days, and he's like, I absolutely have to know there were never any dogs or cats in this property I'm coming to. And
Wow.
I could assure him of that. So decide early on your pet policy, what you're going to allow, what you're not going to allow, and then stick to it. Because there are benefits to having a pet friendly place. People are looking for that. A lot of people travel with their cats and dogs. I've even had weird requests like, can I bring my guinea pigs? And so I said no to that one. But not because I don't like guinea pigs. It's just, there's a lot of shavings and, and
Yeah.
running around. They can, anyway. But so yeah, so I would say the pet policy would be the important consideration as well. And then I would absolutely set a policy. I do this myself, of no parties, because
Yes, of
the
course.
allowing the parties has caused such an issue with Airbnb, and it's this big hubbub, at
Oh,
least
yeah.
locally on the Gulf of Mexico, where I live primarily. There are quote unquote party houses that are ruining neighborhoods. It gives all hosts a bad name. So I would say,
Right.
set your policy and say, you may have a larger property and allow a bunch of people, but have standards and try to match the local standards. Like, if there's a 10 p.m. quiet ordinance, no noise after 10 p.m., make sure you have that as a rule in your house rules. But yeah, because that's what's kind of spoiling the short-term rental business for everybody, is the negative feedback we're getting from neighborhoods, because people come in, the guests aren't really
Yep.
vetted, they're doing whatever. I mean, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on. But if you just set your policies early, you'll have a greater success.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I have another question about now technology. You said that you don't use much, but do you
No.
have to? Uh, what does a person need to get started then?
Well, it's free and inexpensive to create your listing, whether it's a room in your home or some parts of the country you have a base, maybe a finished basement or a finished space that you want to put on. Create your listing. It's free. Put it on both, Airbnb and VRBO. Again, like I said, I have looked into platforms that help sync between the software, but I found them more cumbersome than me doing it myself. So I ended up saying, I'm not going to invest the money in to do that because it seems even more cumbersome than what I'm doing right now. So I would say the barriers to entry. Well, the other important thing I would say is there's a lot of talk online about rental arbitrage, being sort
Yes.
of a middle person
Uh,
between,
yeah.
you don't own the home, but you're going to step in and then you're going to
Yep.
take over and sort of be a quasi property manager and fill it with Airbnb and VRBO guests. I find a lot of risk and liability to that. I was talking to my real estate attorney yesterday, and because you hear it a lot. There's a lot of noise out there about it. I don't advocate it. I think it gets a lot messier, and there's more potential risk of litigation.
Yep.
Also, homeowners policies, you can't insure on a property you don't own. And so I talk in the book too about, the liability insurance you should have and how you set up your company to protect you and your personal assets. But so anyway, it's a fascinating industry to be in right now. There's a lot of change. There's a lot of dynamic things happening. I find it fascinating, and I would just say, make sure you own your property. But overall, there's not a huge barrier to entry. Just hop on and see what happens. Get your listing out there, do it as professionally as you can, and then see what bookings you get.
Great. So now let's talk about the income side. How can one
Yes.
assess whether a potential rental or, and its
Hmm.
location will be good or not?
That's a great question. I've been pleasantly surprised over the years. I've had rentals in cities, large cities. I've had them in resort towns. I've had, surprisingly, one of my best one is in a rural part of the mountains in Virginia. And I never, sorry, I had a text come through. I never thought that property. I was like, let's put it on, see what happens. And that one sometimes outperforms the others. It's phenomenal. I was like, why? Why are people going there? I had to buy the property for a specific reason, a family reason, and when I'm not there, it just rents out like hotcakes. So I think people sometimes can limit themselves in their own mind, saying, "I'm not sure this will work." I would say make sure you check the regulations in your town or municipality to make sure they allow the short-term rentals, because there are certain parts of the country where they'll have like a 30-day minimum, and that might impact your ability to earn as much as you'd like. But just make sure you study the local rules and regulations. In some places, it's more heavily regulated than others. In some places, it's really not regulated at all. So definitely know your market. But I think a short-term rental can be successful pretty much anywhere in the United States of America, based
Wow.
on my own experience. And also, it's a good. I mean, well, I'll let you go on your
No, no,
next
no,
question because I
please.
think I
Yeah,
know where it's going. But I won't jump. I won't jump the track. So.
no, so my next question would be, is it worth doing it in your local market? So, I have been looking all over US, but when you
Mhm.
are getting started, is it worth looking at your local market only? Because it's too expensive here in Bay Area. And even
Yeah.
after, even if you're earning 500, $600 a night, it will still not make sense. So,
Right.
what do you suggest to your clients?
Right. Well, I would say I would probably, yeah, some areas like I have a client in LA, for example, that's a
Exactly.
tough market. Denver housing is like,
Yep.
everybody knows that very
All
well.
the Pacific
Um,
Northwest. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, I think you want to, just like any other business investment, you want to make sure that, sort of run your numbers and make sure that you have a reasonable ROI. You can look at what other homes in a similar area that you're considering, how they're doing. I always like to say, where do I want to go? Where do I want to spend time? Where do I need to
Yes,
spend
that's it.
time? If you have a student going into college, it might make a lot of sense to have purchase something near where they're going to college, for example. But definitely do your due diligence, because it's better if it's a place you'd like to visit and a place that you're interested in and passionate about. I
And
think
do
that's my
you
best advice on that one.
That's awesome. Do you use
Yeah.
Airbnb to do all your research, or do you also use AirDNA or some other platforms to research if it's going to be a good location, maybe crime wise, maybe rental income wise, all that, and if it's going to be too many Airbnbs in that area,
Right.
you how do you do research, or where
Yeah,
do you
so
go?
I'm aware of AirDNA. I think it's a great tool. Yes, absolutely. I would use that tool to get your research, but also, reading. You can also set Google alerts, of course, on a particular area, whatever. You can review crime reports and stuff like that. I tend to be a real seeker and digger of information. So I think the more information you have, the better, whether it's through a platform or whether it's doing your own digging. Um, Talk to friends and neighbors in the area. Also see how things are performing in that market. Go as a traveler onto VRBO or Airbnb and see what it's looking like and see the reviews. And you can see if places are really booked up that it would be similar to yours. So I think it's really a mix. I really dig deep before I do so. I'm actually looking to purchase another property in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia because I have a housekeeping staff there. I have handy, resources to handy people. I don't want to say handyman because it might be handy woman, but I have access to people who could easily get from one location to another. So you'd have the economies of scale, that they just go down the road or across the mountain or whatever to get to, or just something that makes sense logistically, is good too, especially in terms also of shipping supplies, like the hotel grade supplies of the mini shampoo bottles and the conditioner
Yes.
bottles and the soap. So do, one drop ship and then have it distributed to one or two properties makes a lot of sense.
Oh, that's great. So, last question before we take a quick break. What are some of your favorite Airbnb hosting locations?
Oh, my favorites. I've loved them all for different reasons. Do you mean as a guest or as a host?
As a host, because
Oh,
I want to make
as a
sure that,
host.
yeah, because where all do you love to go, and maybe where all you'll make
Yes.
the most amount of money, right? The net
Yeah.
operating income.
Yeah, so I had a great rental here in Sarasota on the Gulf Coast of Mexico, resort town, a 3 bedroom, 2 bath. Those rent great, by the way.
Yes,
A three
you
two
need at
is
least three,
incredible.
two, yeah, three bedroom.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think you guys touched on that before. But that property, I was using it from time to time, for my personal use. So it was only a part-time rental. I bought it and held it for 5 years. It was there toward the end of my owning it, just as a part-time rental. It was around 42,000 a year for a 3-2,
Oh, wow.
located downtown, but in a transitional neighborhood. Um, Sarasota has a good number of transitional neighborhoods and opportunities. I don't want to bring too many more people to Sarasota because the traffic's getting kind of bad. I know I can't complain though because it's worse in a lot of other areas. But that property was really cranking at 42, just part time, and that was out without really trying. And so, I made the decision to simplify, like I said, skinny down to 2 properties. But that one was doing really well. 3-2 transitional neighborhood, about a 10-minute drive to the beach. It wasn't right on the beach. You don't have to be right on the beach. You don't have to be right in the mountains. You can be 30 or 45 minutes outside of those types of natural resources, or, a key destination like, an attraction, like a cultural attraction or something like that. I think you're okay. People don't mind driving. And I certainly have seen those still rent very well. So Gulf of Mexico, Sarasota, been great for rentals. Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia have been incredible for me and my family. And then, the Atlanta property did very well too. After we transformed it from the annual lease over, it was situated on the park, like Midtown and Virginia
Oh,
Highlands, right on Piedmont Park. That was an incredible rental as well.
Midtown
So,
Highland area is
yeah,
great. Yeah.
yeah. And the great news is you're earning that short-term rental income, but then you hold it for as long as you want,
Right.
and then you time the market. If you want to sell it, you sell it. If not, you hang on to it. But
Yeah.
I'm a long-term holder. I hold them for
Right.
5, 10, 20 years sometimes. I'm not a short-term holder flipper type person. So,
Yeah,
but
me too.
some people do that. Yeah, some people. The buy and hold strategy is a very, I think, very solid from a investment standpoint.
Yeah, and from the long-term holder perspective, I think you touched on a very good important topic at that. If you can time the market, no one can time the market, but at least you don't have to, if you are getting income, you don't have to sell it as a loss, right? If you are
Right,
not have, if you don't
exactly.
have positive cash flow or you are barely breaking even, then when the
Right,
time comes, you may want to get out of it. And maybe that time is not right. But if you are
right,
getting paid, I don't have to sell
right.
when the property drops 50%. I don't care. I'm
Right,
getting paid, right?
exactly. Exactly. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, in times of inflation, I think Elon Musk said recently, you can, a lot of people love him, a lot of people hate Elon Musk, but he said in a time of inflation, he'd rather hold tangible assets, and I
Yes.
agree. Like, I think now's a good time. I mean, things are starting to dip a little bit from the housing standpoint. I'm waiting a little bit longer, but
Me
I think
too.
we're going to start to see some deals, and it's a great thing to hold in a, you know, in time of inflation. At least I prefer that as an
Yeah,
investment
I'm
strategy.
I'm keeping some dry powder being ready right now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Excellent.
So let's move on.
Okay.
Let's talk about the last five questions I ask every guest. So are you ready for fire round?
Yes, yes, I'm ready. Woohoo!
We are
I'm
almost
ready.
done. Would you be changing any business or investment strategy because of inflation or recession?
No,
Because we know either one is coming, either one is
yes,
here to
yes. Yes, inflation's here. I already think we're in a recession. I'm not changing anything. I am like you, holding my powder, waiting for the right moment. I have a realtor looking right now for the next thing. I'd like it to be close to my existing thing, the one I was talking about in the Blue Ridge
Right.
Mountains of Virginia. No, I'm not going to change anything. I'm going to keep doing what I've been doing because, you know, it's been working so well over 20 years. I've been able to quit my 9 to 5 job, which I wasn't super crazy about. I got out of corporate America after 20, 25 years. And I'm able to be, you know, the master of my own time. By mastering hosting, I've been able to gain that freedom. So no, I'm going to keep doing it the way I've been doing it, and hopefully helping other people do it, you know, the right way, and in a very lucrative way as well for them.
Favorite real estate, finance, or business related book other than yours or mine?
Yes. Yes. I can't, I haven't read yours yet, but I'm going to. I'm so excited about it. Um the one that I think of the most, I haven't had time to read a business book lately, but I would say the one that had a huge impact on me was came out probably in the, I don't know, late 90s, early 2000s, but it was The 4 Hour Work Week by Tim
Oh,
Ferriss.
yes, that's a great book.
Yes, and you know, it
Okay.
kind of changed my mindset. Like, I'm doing this wrong. I'm spending all this time in an office, and it didn't feel like a fair trade. I'm giving all this time. I'm giving all my family time over. Wasn't getting to take vacations. Sometimes I had to skip when the workload was too heavy. I regret those moments, and so that one was really like, okay, maybe there's a different way to structure this and do this where I don't have to be beholden to, you know, a corporate job. And I sort of, you know, over the last 20 years, I've taken that and run with it. And to be, you know, financially independent and the master of my own time and not be beholden to, you know, reporting to someone else has been the greatest thing for me, because my fiance and my family and I, we love to travel. And that's sort of where we, you know, when we're not working, that's what we're doing. We're, you know, trying to plan the next great trip that we're going to go on. So short-term rentals have done that for us, and we're going to destinations I never, and doing things I never thought we'd be able to do. Like we just booked a excursion, a week long on a yacht in the Mediterranean, the Santorini,
Nice.
and places I've never seen, like the bucket list places
Yeah.
that I've always wanted to go. And you know, if I had stuck with my corporate gigs, I don't
Maybe
think
not.
I would have. I don't think that would have been in the cards for us. So
Right.
it's been tremendously life changing in so many ways.
Any tool or website you recommend or you cannot live without?
For me right now, it's all about the platforms. I'm on them every day. You know, I mentioned earlier, I'm not exactly the technology maven. I do keep up with what's going on. I'm spending quite a good bit of time on social media and trying new things. I'm actually I'm actually going out on TikTok soon. And I'm like, oh, okay, now I've got to master a new platform, you know. So, but it's all about, you know, I just want to spread the word. I want to help other people learn how to be great hosts, or if they're new to it, like just trying it out, whatever their comfort level is, or if they're a veteran, I want them to be able to get even better at it. But I'm trying to reach new people and places I've never reached before. And, we'll see where that goes. That's very exciting.
Oh, that's great. Any advice for beginner investors?
Own the home, own the property, own the space, do what you can. I mean, now is going to be a good time soon, I believe. It's hard to read the tea leaves, but I think we're coming up on a time where we'll be able to snatch up properties. I know in some parts of Virginia that are very beautiful, you can get a property now it needs work, but $50,000.
Wow, still.
Yeah. So I mean, I actually probably 8 years ago picked up 5 acres and a house for $26,000. So there are certain markets. I have a friend who I helped her get on Airbnb and VRBO with her property. It was in Mississippi. It was a fixer-upper, a small town, and that thing is going like gangbusters in a small town in Mississippi. And that's truly, it's changed their life. So I'd say just try to buy something and jump in and go for it and see what happens. Oh, I think I lost you on the audio there.
How do you give back?
How do I give back? Giving back's always been in my family's DNA. I talk some about this in online books and articles, but we started a hybrid hospitality concept with a boutique inn, and those rooms were all rented on, the different platforms. But over the time of owning that space, which is still around, it's called the Reserve Retreat, but we donated time, donations, and venue space to over like 50 nonprofit organizations. I'm typically sit on a board of directors for an organization. Right now, I'm on the board of directors for a Healthy Start Coalition. They help women, infants, and children get a better start in the early years, providing what's needed for a baby or a young child to grow and develop in a good way. And then also when I was in New York City, I was working with some nonprofit clients on grant writing, and I helped one of my nonprofits win $1 million grant from the city to help at-risk and children who needed preschool education to hopefully help them get a better start in life. So I've always been deeply involved in education and just giving back. And my partner is a retired Marine, and she's a mental health therapist, and she counsels veterans all the time. So it's when we're not working on the short-term rentals, it's really important that we all give back to the extent we can and all the ways we can. And I'm trying to instill that in my children as well. So
that's awesome. How can my listeners reach out to you?
I am building my website. It'll be up and live by the end of August, a new and improved website. I'm on Facebook. I have both a personal page that I do allow connections, and then I have a Facebook page, How to Rent Your Home or Space on Airbnb and VRBO. It's the same as the book title. And then I'm on most social media. I'll be on TikTok here in probably in a few days, but Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn as well. You can just look me up by name. I lost the audio again. Sorry.
Thank you so much, Kim, for your time.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I love talking about this, and I can't wait to read your book. And I'll keep listening because you are doing such a great job with all the financial advice, and I'm going to learn a lot from you in this channel as well.
No, much appreciated. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for listening to the Wealth Matters podcast. If you enjoyed it, please leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes so others can enjoy the show too. Have a great week and happy investing!